So I remember as a child, we had a book, one of those big hardbound books, I guess Disney classic stories, and one of those was Pinocchio. I remember as a child, I can see that picture on the page clearly in my mind of Pinocchio on a raft with a pole and a lamp burning, all being swallowed by a big fish. So to read this story, as he'll talk about in a little bit, some people question or deny it. It's a myth. It's a whatever. It was no problem for me to come and read the story of Jonah and go, just a guy? There's no boat and lamp and pole and all that other stuff? He gets swallowed? Yeah, no problem. No problem for me. So I was just thinking in getting ready for this particular study of all the minor prophets. Would you agree Jonah might be the best known, the most familiar? Maybe some yes, maybe some no. I would think most people at least know somewhat the story of Jonah. Maybe don't know, where Obadiah went and who he was talking to, and about the Lord's army of locusts and all that stuff. That's your quick review over the last 2 weeks. But a lot of story in the book of Jonah, right? 4 chapters of story and 1/2 of a verse of preaching. Now that's sneak peek looking ahead to next week, right? I think in chapter 3, verse 4, half of the verse, everything he's going to say that's the sermon, as we'd say, or the preaching, is wrapped up pretty quick. He'd be a popular local evangelist, wouldn't he? Get in, get out, move on. But got a lot to cover before we get to that point over in chapter 3. So since I was thinking he's probably well known, we could very easily do this. Turn that on and do a pretest about Jonah, right? Because we know all this stuff. Where did God want Jonah to go preach? Nineveh. I think I heard that all around. He prophesied during the reign of which king of Judah? He is set into a time frame, a timeline. You don't have to spell it, just say it. Oh, you can get tricky. Maybe some overlap there. Start with Amaziah into Jehoshaphat. Jeroboam. Second. Thank you. Keep me straight. Maybe I don't know what I thought I knew about Jonah. Well, he got on a ship and headed what direction? Opposite. As far away from where he's told to go. And we'll look at this in a map on a moment. I think he would be headed west, didn't he? Somewhat. What had the Lord prepared to swallow up Jonah? A large fish, a whale, sea monster, depending on what translation you're reading there. Okay. And how long did he spend at that place swallowed up? 3 days and 3 nights. And so again, a case we made the point in passing last week about there's so many ways studying, knowing things about the minor prophets. Here a particular story, a particular incident is going to come to pass, as he'll bring out in the workbook, when Jesus makes reference. Well, if Jesus just come along and talked about, I myself am going to spend 3 days and 3 nights, in the earth or whatever. But he gives this like unto, just as Jonah had done. There's a reference, there's understanding, okay, if that's what happened there, you're saying something similar Jesus is going to do in your life also. Okie doke. So, a few things at the beginning to set the story, and this photo was taken by Jonah's dad from the beach. No, an artist rendering was not taken by the son of Amittai. So some stuff about getting started in the book or background of the book. The date of it, when does the author of this book, or the Hark writer, kind of set? You could go back and look at the timeline up front, or he brings it out within this lesson. Approximately what year? I'm sorry? 790-ish, along in there? Yeah. It's still in the period, if you're looking back or think, divided kingdom. So we've still got Israel up north, Judah down south, somewhere during that time frame that he's in there, and suggests also he might have overlapped not only with the kings that were mentioned, but also overlapped with Elisha, perhaps at the end or near the end of Elisha's ministry when Jonah went out and was doing his thing. So the next section talks about the book itself, and some modern theologians who have discounted the book, or okay, it's really a book, but discount the actual events. They weren't actual events. Some say it's just a myth, it didn't happen at all. Others, it's some kind of allegory about the nation of Israel. It's just a story kind of depicting Israel falling away, or leaving God, coming back to Him, and all this kind of stuff. Or it's a story, it's an event, it's something that happened. And he says, and I reading this next sentence remind me a lot of a study we were having when Michael several months back talked about the scriptures and all. Unbelievers will discredit the book because it reveals that which is miraculous. And into that paragraph, it reveals their own unbelief in the power of God, the integrity of the scriptures as a whole. So this tale of Jonah, so many things there. If you don't believe God, His power to do miracles, then of course a story like this would not make sense, or you couldn't wrap your brain around it. But there's so many things, events throughout the Bible. If you don't believe God, that couldn't have happened. Never seen that happen. It hasn't happened before or since. You're right. God has never chosen to have a fish swallow a guy like this and spit him back up on land 3 days later. But otherwise, if you have faith, it's no stretch to, and he talks about here, some will argue, well, historically or by the laws of nature, that just can't be done. Or scientists say, no, that's impossible to do. Okay, by the laws of nature that are normal day-to-day things, sure. But again, if you believe in a God and His power, who created all things, who manipulates or uses these things, or prepares a fish, or goes to His storehouse and sends this wind out to cause a storm on the sea or whatever, then it's no problem to go, oh, He had a fish swallow a guy. Okay, well, what happened, and why that happened, and what's that about? And you go on reading the story and looking for the purpose of God, perhaps, or what He wants to come out of it. And hopefully we'll touch on some of that tonight also. So he suggests some reasons arguing for its veracity. You can look at those there. There's nothing in the book that says or clues or hints says, hey, this isn't real, but let me tell you a story, or imagine if this happened, or something like that. No, it's just straightforward as a narrative, a historical fact. The Jews receiving the book and accepting it, and his point, or the logic there being, since Jonah was from, we didn't touch on that yet. Where was he from? Hometown. I don't know how to pronounce it either. Gath-Hepher, something like that, up in the land of Zebulun. I think that's brought out over in the 2 Kings account that he makes reference to there. So he was a Gentile, is kind of the point. Why would the Jews, if it's something about a Gentile who, they hated and were odds at, why would they accept or, include this story or this book if there was any doubt in their minds about it? But not so, he says. It was something still, the working of God, just God used this guy from this place. And Jesus, number 3, confirming the story of Jonah regarding its historical fact, likening unto His own death, burial, and resurrection after 3 days. So he says to accept one is to accept the other. Vice versa. Of course, some don't accept Jesus being resurrected from the dead, and so then you would discount the story of Jonah as well. It kind of goes hand in hand. Let's see. I think next had kind of a map here, not so much with focusing on the nation of Israel, which would be right over here, lower right-hand corner, Joppa on the coastline there of the Mediterranean or Great Sea. So from that area, well, near there, first at Zebulun, Jonah was called, go up to Nineveh, way up to the northeast, right? Nineveh, the capital of what nation? Syria. Yeah, sure. So God said, oh, that's where I want you to go. So instead of going that way, as some suggested earlier, he first goes down to Joppa. And why does he go to Joppa? To hop on a boat and head the opposite direction, or west, and you see all the way down the length, a city in Spain, which is, it's going to empty on out into the big sea. But how far of distance does he suggest this is to Tarshish? A couple thousand miles. So it's great in distance. It's in the total opposite direction. He's gotten on this ship, and that's where he's headed. If I can get there, God will forget me, or he'll send somebody else up here, or maybe he'll forget Nineveh, or whatever. That would seem to be kind of Jonah's thinking. They're not worth the time and effort, and I sure don't want to go do it. Does it ever pay to try to disobey God or flee or hide from God? It doesn't, does it? In this story, literally, he pays money and buys a ticket, and I don't know what it costs to go the full length. I want to go all the way to Tarshish. That's probably a pretty good fare, good distance. He loses that money, doesn't he? Besides being thrown overboard and don't know if he's going to live or not. Number of things involved in that. Okay. Thought he escaped, or not go hide behind a bush or in a cave or something. Yeah. He is really gone. So, nation of Assyria, bottom of page 18. Of course, it's going to come back into play sometime in carrying away the nation of Israel, the 10 tribes, about 722 BC. So they're already to a point, though, themselves of wickedness. And it's kind of got to thinking, not that we're given insight or how things stack up, but God using nations, right, to come in, and this nation's evil or wicked and won't listen or repent or do right anymore. So here you see this progression. I don't know what's the word really I'm looking for. If this is 790, 780, somewhere in there, it's only 60, 70 years before they're going to carry off Israel, and then something's going to happen to Assyria, matter of a few years, short time down the line. But he's going to use them for a purpose and a period against Israel, and then somebody else is going to come in, and Assyria or Nineveh, he's going there with preaching, repent, or bad things are going to happen. Just kind of this, stacking up of nations, or how God, from his vantage point, is looking across time and through the years ahead, that we don't have that capability, other than if God sends a messenger and says, hey, something's going to happen. If we listen and believe it, we could have a sense of what's coming down the road. Okay. Good there. Long ways. He went the other way. Just looking at the outline. Again, this is just recreating the one from the book. And we're going through the first couple of chapters tonight, is the plan, the goal, and the way it's laid out. So that's where we'll try to get. And I just have a few thoughts. And if you have some as we go through the first section, Jonah's call and flight to Tarshish. Here it is, the word of the Lord, verse 1, came to, we mentioned this before. They're not just deciding this on their own, but God calls them to be a messenger, a spokesman, take a particular message to a particular group of people that needs it, because of their conditions and how they are living. First couple of verses there refers to, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry against it. Did you look up any background or do any digging yet on the origin of the city of Nineveh? Who built it? Genesis 10, verses 9, 10, and 11. A guy named Nimrod, you might have heard of. He's noted for some other things, but among those, he builds the city of Nineveh. So it's been around for a long time, going back to Genesis chapter 10. Capital of a Gentile nation, as he says here, a dread enemy of his own people, right, of the nation of Israel. But into verse 2, he's told Jonah, I apologize, all in my study and every time I, in my mind, talked about this, getting ready, I say Joel half the time because we just came out of Joel, but this is Jonah. I try to keep looking at the title of the book before I speak. So God's speaking, go in to this city, cry against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. So the point here I just see is God, he's not just arbitrary in destroying nations. I'm tired of those people, or I don't like the architecture of their cities or the color of their clothes or whatever. No, it's what they've done. It's their character. It's his expectations he's had of them, just as we have great detail of the law and commandments, details, expectations for the Israelite nation. We're not given all this usually on the backside, but God has relations with other countries. He has expectations. He's given them law or commandments. They're not doing it. Their wickedness is come up before me. So he's giving this commandment, go to them. Verse 3, talked about already, he paid to get away. He goes down to Joppa, found a ship. He pays the fare thereof, goes down into it to go from the presence of the Lord, was kind of his thinking here. Ooh, verse 4 and following. The Lord sends this great wind. I didn't look up. I meant to. Is it in Job? It talks about so much towards the end of the book about God's doing in nature of him having the storehouses, like he sends snow out of his warehouse or storehouse and has wind or sends rains. I'm thinking it's in Job, and I said I didn't look that up. But here it is. It's a common thing for winds to come up anywhere around the world, out on a body of water. This is not just a normal wind, not just a hot and cold front hitting together and stirring something up. The Lord prepares or sends, particularly, a great wind of the sea. There's a mighty tempest in the sea. Man, I don't know if that got your attention or not as you're reading through these couple of chapters. Tempest, verse 4. Tempest, verse 11, tempest, verse 12, tempest or tempestuous, some form of it, verse 13. Again, verse 15, he's described the seas were raging. So he's really trying to paint or get this picture of the conditions and how bad things were, so much so that verse 4, they thought we're sunk, right? There's such a wind, such a storm, we thought the ship was going to be broken, or that was what it looked like to the sailors involved and those on the ship or involved in this. What do the sailors do facing this great wind? They're going to cast lots, in a little bit. Before that, this storm comes up and we can't handle it. We're going to lighten the load. I mean, you get my attention, you start throwing the food in my suitcase over the side, right? Man. The first thing they did, they're going to make petitions to their own gods. And again, we don't have great detail. It's just a statement or two and moves on. Wondered about their faith, their religion, if it even was that, or was it just the nature of their job? They're crying to their own lowercase g, right, gods, an appeal in the time of trouble. Was that just the extent of their faith? Live life how I want to, but when times get hard or things go bad or it's beyond my control, they start calling out to these, their other gods, whoever that might have been for them. They throw out the stuff, yes. Verse 6, let's see, here comes the shipmaster, to Jonah, who's been down on the sides of the belly of the ship, fast asleep. We've tried our gods. Now we need to make sure we've tried every god, right? What are you doing down here? Why aren't you up kneeling or praying or helping throw this stuff over and trying to, calm this situation? Call upon thy God, if so be that God will think upon us that we perish not. I just thought about Paul walking through Athens, all of the idols there, to all the hundreds and hundreds of gods, even an unknown. We don't want to miss one. We got to try everyone. And anything they were trying wasn't making the situation better. So you try to your God too. And verse 7, now come, we'll cast the lots. We can know for whose cause this evil is upon us. Again, did they have some awareness? This isn't just a really bad storm. It's something beyond any storm we've ever seen or heard of, that we can't control the boat. We can't row to land. in spite of our best efforts or something. So their thing is, something evil has come upon us. There's a reason behind this, so we're going to cast lots, and they cast them. Wow, it lands on Jonah. So now they're, verse 8, tell it, who are you? Where are you from? What are you doing? What's this all about? All the signs are pointing to you, right? And he doesn't hold back. He tells them exactly, I'm a Hebrew, verse 9, and I fear the Lord. Let me pause there. My notes have got a question. In what sense do you think he feared the Lord? Fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom, right? Solomon would write. He does have knowledge about God. He can go ahead and say he's the Lord, the God of heaven, the one that made sea and dry land. He knows all this about God. I just wonder if during this book we're seeing some increase in his faith. He does know about God, acknowledges him. I think by the end of the book his faith is going to grow somewhat. And I find it interesting also there, verse 9 at the end of it, him mentioning even the God who made the sea and the dry land, which is going to be very pivotal in this story, isn't it? Whether you're in the ocean or want to be back on dry land, where you can walk and live and breathe normally and all that, and he will eventually get back there. Let's see. Right. They're planning to go all the way. There you go. Yeah. The expectation is to get on the boat and we're all going to Tarshish. Yeah. So I just see in this when he says, I fear the Lord. Maybe at this point early on or at this point in his life, he fears the punishment of the Lord. I mean, if God finds me, and if you're telling the lots say it's me and that's what this storm really is all about, yeah, I'm going to be punished for what I've tried to do. But he does have a sense of faith, and I don't take that away from him. Next section, he's cast into the sea. First, he's offered an out, isn't he? The sailors, okay, if you're the problem, you're the cause here, what can we do to you? We just want this storm to stop. What will it take? I mean, I don't know what they think it's a certain amount of money or what it might be. And his response is, stand up, guy. You're going to throw me overboard, cast me in the sea, and the seas will be calm. I know it's for my sake. This great tempest is upon us. He's offered an out, doesn't do it. They first try, valiant effort. First, we'll try to row to land, get through this or get beyond it or get out of the storm path. We couldn't do that. We just see in here, of course, God's power, nature, greater than man's power. Guys who made their living and, took boats all the time, they couldn't do that. Even verse 13 and 14, don't you find in this some good characteristics among the sailors? That they're going to try. We'll try and save your life. We don't want to just chunk you over, casually like it's nothing. They try some things, and then they're going to pray to this new, you say your God is Jehovah. We're going to pray to him. Don't let his blood be on our heads or on our hands, but we are going to throw you overboard. And of course, when they do that, calm and peace once again. Again, I see maybe increasing in faith among these sailors. I don't know if it's the first time they've heard of Jehovah. If they've been as close as Joppa or been to that country, probably heard of him before, but maybe now as they start to see some of his workings and the sea's calm, sea ceases from raging, they're fearing, offering sacrifice, they're making vows to the Lord. We're not told what those are, but maybe some increase of faith for them. Verse 17, he talks about a significant verse. First, the fish that the Lord prepared, and we've already talked about this. Are you looking at laws of nature, or are you looking at something God could and did do, as I believe? And secondly, going to New Testament references, it's significant. Jesus compares it to his own death and resurrection. Verse 17, just seeing this, the Lord had prepared a great fish. He works with purpose, right? There's a reason he created or made or brought this fish to this point to do his work, carry out his plan. And I see it also then in chapter 2, verse 3, jumping ahead to Jonah's prayer, for thou hadst cast me into the deep. No, it was the sailors, it was those guys on the boat that did it. Thou, Lord, you cast me in the sea, and this is what happened and why you did it. Again, Lord's purpose, Lord's plan being carried out by nations, by men, by creatures, by forces of nature. All of them he could choose and use any of them, and does at time to make these things happen. Anything through chapter 1? Yes? It would be different, wouldn't it? Kind of like if you're on one of those rides at Six Flags with roaring waters, and you're on the boat and the power goes off and all of a sudden you're just sitting still or something. But much worse in their case. So chapter 2 is about him praying to God out of the belly of this fish. Some beautiful language through here. I hope you do and did and take the time and read this, maybe even read out loud so you hear it like a voice as it was uttered. Him talking about where he was and the depths that he went to, and the waters washed over me, and the seaweed wrapped around my head, and all these kinds of, again, imagery. But in the belly of this great fish, it's literally where he had been, down in the depths of the water, until 3 days and 3 nights have passed. From in the workbook uses the term, verse 1 through 4, out of shed. King James uses the term out of the belly of hell, which is, Sheol, the realm of the dead, as he talks about here, or the grave or the pit. You see those terms used also. So I'm not sure about that term shed, but the idea certainly is the same. The Lord heard him. Jonah promised, I'll look again towards thy temple. Verse 8, kind of to me, that was a beautiful verse also. They that observe lying vanities forsake their own mercy. And he says that's going to represent systems of false hope, the lying vanities. But unlike, and to me it's kind of reference back to what has just happened, the situation among these sailors, said they're worshiping, calling on other gods, lowercase g. But they end up having some mercy, right? They were willing, tried to save his life, don't want to throw you overboard, seem to have regrets, even though that's the last, what we've got to do to spare the ship, to spare everybody. But I just like that verse also in going through this section. And then at verse 10, the Lord spake to the fish, it vomits out Jonah on the dry land. Here again, the Lord controlling his creation, and it's just by the power of his word that a fish under however many feet or meters of water, whatever, hears and comes and deposits Jonah back on the beach. Again, not way down there by Tarshish, but back here, presumably, it doesn't spell out, but presumably back on the land, like maybe around Joppa or back along the coastline, because you need to head that way, northeast up to the city of Nineveh. Any thoughts through chapter 2? Anything strike in particular in his prayer, his thoughts? Well, I was trying to make that, but I was thinking of a typewriter and making, anyway. Just all, I got you. That would make sense. Some takeaways or application. We cannot flee from the presence of the Lord, right? Lisa touched on this, as far as you could go, kind of the known world, that's the boundary, they thought, headed to the west. Didn't matter. The Lord knew and can send water or fish or somebody else, something else to get you there, whatever it might be. 2, his message must be preached, even if it seems undesirable to the messenger. And we're going to see that brought out even more so chapters 3 and 4. Jonah doesn't want to go tell these people to repent. He's afraid, if they hear they might do that, well, what do you know, they did. And then he's going to get all grumpy about that. And so I thought, application, are there, and I'm not asking you to spit them out, are there any commands in the Bible, things God commands us to do besides preaching that maybe I don't understand, I don't get that doesn't make sense to me, or human, but I need to do it anyway, simply because he commands it, or commands to do it a certain way. It's not how I would do it, or we might get together and decide to do it, but the work of God needs to be done. And here, when you are a prophet, and that was the whole job, to be that spokesman, take this message and go deliver it. He didn't want to do it and tried to get away from it and run back. A couple other diseases I just added, because the Lord said so, reason enough. Chapter 1 starts out, the word of the Lord comes from, go preach to Nineveh, that great city. Intermeeting story, go some miles, get on a ship, he's trying to get away. Days in the water, days and night, come back. Here it's repeated. Chapter 3. The word comes to him the second time. It's going to be the same. Go to Nineveh, preach to that great city. Right? Lord didn't change, but he's got a second opportunity. And so, again, some things the Lord, do we want to learn the hard way as Jonah had to, or do we just simply want to do it? It's the Lord's command, so yeah, I'll go do that thing. Whatever it might be. And the last one I put is, just the thought from some of these, particularly in chapter 2, you can pray from anywhere to be heard by God. Sometimes it's not a physical location like belly of a whale down in the ocean, but maybe just a situation or a place in our life. And you may have talked to people, I've talked to a couple through the years that, just really down and out, and you try to, you don't know the things I've done, and it's just horrible, and I'm an awful person, and God would never forgive me, as if, right, I've so distanced myself from God, it's kind of useless, is their logic. No, even though, as he said, which verse 4 of chapter 2, I'm cast out of thy sight, just a phrase, right? Not literally, God could see, anywhere, anything, but we're not out of his sight. We're not too far away. There is no distance too great that we can't, or awful condition of our life that we can't pray to God and be heard by him. And his desire, Old Testament, New Testament, is that people be saved. That's what he always works towards, or has a plan for that to happen. Sometimes people go along with it and get on board, and sometimes they refuse, and they're lost. Who was the father of Jonah? Amittai. And what city he was sent? We said to Nineveh, approximately 500 miles northeast in this direction. But he went, in other words, you told me, from Joppa towards Tarshish. What did the Lord do? Send a great wind, storm, all of the above into the sea. And the mariners, how they determined Jonah's the cause, the casting of lots, and it fell on him. How does he describe himself to the mariners? I'm a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven. The effect on them, they were all exceedingly afraid, and now vows and sacrifices. Did that last or carry on? Who knows? We can just hope that effect of it. What did the Lord prepare to swallow the great fish? And out of the fish's belly he prayed. Number 9. Who forsakes their own mercy? Those that observe lying vanities. The mariners immediately threw Jonah into the sea after they learned his guilt before the Lord. False. They rowed hard trying to get to land, right? Jonah went to hell, or Sheol, the grave, before he went to Nineveh. That's true. 2 verse 2. 3, Jonah prayed that he would look again toward God's holy temple. It was out of his physical sight or capability, but he did want to turn that direction again and be back there, if literal or just in his mind. He's looking back to God. When Jonah was strong, he remembered the Lord. Well, hopefully that's true, but false, right? 2 verse 7, it's when he was what? When my soul fainted within me, I remember the Lord, and my prayer came to thee. The Lord spake to the fish, and it obeyed. Yep, true. So we've touched, I think, we're about out of time. Let me just quickly, I thought about this on Jonah. He's one of those kind of like doubting Thomas in the New Testament. First mentioned, we tend to go to the negative, because he doubted and all this, but there were positive things about him. I was thinking just kind of the similar things about Jonah. Like any human being, there's good and bad, strengths and weaknesses, and maybe it changes at times in his life. On the one hand, he's fearful. God says, go do this. He fled, and he finds himself in the belly of a fish. Not the best of circumstances or way I want to live for 3 days and 3 nights. But on the other hand, he is prayerful. See that brought out throughout chapter 2. Even in his down times and worst of times, hopefully when he's strong also. He ends up repenting. Come back, yeah, I'll do that. He kept his word. He kept his vow in one of these verses here in chapter 2, right? I kept my vow, talking about salvation is of the Lord, into verse 9. I will pay that I have vowed. Salvation is of the Lord. So even I still inside of me, I don't want to, I don't understand it, all that, but I've repented. I'm going to do what God commanded me. He made a vow to do that, and he's going to go ahead over there and do that. He looks to God, again in trouble when he needs help, and he arose and went. Again, it was against his better judgment, or not where I want to be today, or spend my next week, or however long it's going to take to go 500 miles up there and spend some time up there. But he did get up and go. I'm still looking, for me, within each of these books, kind of a verse. And we're halfway through the book, so I picked this verse so far out of the first 2 chapters, kind of put in my notes, stick in my mind. I'm cast out of thy sight, yet will I look again towards thy holy temple. Chapter 2 and verse 4. Any closing thoughts on the first half of Jonah? Right.
I never really thought about God is showing a very merciful point. Sometimes we are in over our heads and we're drowning. We need to cool down a minute and just see what's going to pick us up. I don't know. I never thought about the mercy in that story.
In keeping him alive in a quiet place, secluded place, so to speak. Thank you. All right. There we go. Next week, chapter 3 and chapter 4, Lord willing.